We drove from the tropical beaches of the Daintree to the hot springs of Mataranka, exploring unique and beautiful places hidden among the harsh terrain. To make it more special, we decided to do at least one photo shoot a day. Join us as we drive from Noah's Beach to Bitter Springs along the Savannah Way. The Savannah Way runs from Cairns in Queensland to Broome in Western Australia. We began our journey at Noah Beach Campground in the Daintree. At low tide, these little crabs can be seen scurrying along the beach en masse. It is also possible then to walk around the headland to a small bay. One of the highlights of this trip was a cruise on the Daintree River. The top end of Australia is croc country, large, saltwater crocodiles. Wildlife is abundant and our guide was very skilled at spotting all manner of creatures. The next day at low tide, we walked around the headland to the bay and were lucky enough to have it to ourselves. This gave us the opportunity to relax and take photos. This was as close as I would get to the water. It rains a lot up here, and this was very nearly me. We were lucky enough to spot a cassowary in the dense undergrowth. Fungus and birds are abundant. Early the next morning, we did some last photos and left Noah Beach. Our next stop was the Gilbert River, a large river that was mostly dry. We flew the drone, which shows just how large it is. It must be spectacular in full flow. We got some incredible photos of the riverbed carved out by water. We took a detour off the Savannah Way to the small Gulf town of Karumba. It's a beautiful spot, popular with the grey nomads. We had some fish and chips for lunch, but being very busy, we decided to move on. Later that afternoon, we reached Teardrop Falls, a beautiful river that still had water. We spent the night on the banks of the river. We spent the day exploring and taking photos. The remnants of the old ferry crossing made a great backdrop. The next leg of the journey took us to Lawnhill Gorge, a spectacular oasis in the harsh surrounds. It's worth bringing the snorkel and flippers, the water is beautifully clear. We had the underwater housing for the GoPro, which made for some unique footage. It can get a little crowded in the water near the campground, which makes having a canoe fantastic. You can hire canoes, but it's costly and you only get limited time. Our favourite thing to do was pack up early and just spend the day on the gorge. We came across this guy, a freshwater crocodile. They're relatively harmless if you leave them alone. There is a boat that does tours of the gorge for those not wanting to paddle. At the end of the first gorge is a boat ramp to tie up and some beautiful waterfalls to explore. We took the canoe down late in the afternoon. Once again, we had the place to ourselves. We spent the time snorkeling and taking photos. There are a few walking tracks well worth doing. The views are spectacular. This one overlooks the escarpment. It is best done very early in the morning as it is too hot during the day. Another of the tracks goes along the top of the gorge. This little guy had to keep lifting his feet off the hot rock. It was very hot. From our vantage point, we spotted this freshwater croc in the gorge. On the other side of the waterfall is the second part of the gorge. At the end is a small island with little rapids on one side. The water is quite shallow and a great spot to cool off. Getting back in the canoe is a bit of a challenge, but I made it. Not very elegantly though. The campground is bare dirt with not much shade. It is very hot. The best place to keep cool and relax is under the shade of the trees lining the gorge. After a walk in the afternoon, it was time for a quick cool off. Our next stop just a little further on was the now closed Kingfisher camp. Along the way we came across this old abandoned truck, a perfect spot for photos. The camp is on Bowthorn Station, a private property. We had lots of visitors that evening. This mass of caterpillars was something we had never seen before. The next day we headed out towards Headley Gorge. The track was narrow with some low overhanging branches. When we got to the car park, we decided to fly the drone. It shows this beautiful gorge in the middle of the dry savannah. After a long hot walk, we arrived at the gorge. We spent the day swimming and taking photos. We are very grateful to have visited this gorge before it was closed to the public. From here we headed north to join back up with the Savannah Way. We stopped at Hell's Gate Roadhouse for some fuel. A little further on we entered the Northern Territory. There's a lot of grass undergrowth, which is great fuel for bushfires. Later that afternoon we arrived at the southern lost city. We set up for the night and got some amazing footage of these spectacular formations with the drone. The sandstone has been weathered over thousands of years to form these monumental pillars. In the morning, while it was still cool, we had a walk around and took some time to do some more photographs. We packed up and left for Lorella Springs. The roads are pretty rough. Ian is always on the lookout for washouts and tire-killing rocks. Lorella Springs is a private property that runs cattle as well as tourism. This means there are a few gates to open and close. One last gate and we are at the campground. The facilities are basic and weren't quite finished. We were at the nudie end, so we had the place to ourselves. Washing clothes out here is done by hand. As you can see, they get pretty dirty. Chores done, we headed out for some adventure. It is a very large property with a lot to see and do. They are continually opening more areas to explore. Tracks are rough and sometimes overgrown, so we flew the drone to scout ahead. We decided to take a track that hadn't been used in a while. This track proved that our truck can go almost anywhere. It was rough and overgrown, quite difficult to spot in some places. There was a small creek running alongside the track. Eventually the track disappeared. We were close to our destination, but it just wasn't worth the risk. We turned around and headed back. We decided instead to stop at the water slide. It's a bit of a climb to the waterhole. The top pool's a great place to cool off, with a rock shelf that makes getting into the deeper water easier. A word of warning, these rocks are slippery. We cooled off, then went to the lower pool for a bit of fun. Once you let go, you're off. I soon discovered that it was so slippery, I needed rescuing out of the pool. As I was getting rescued, the drone decided it was time to land, but crashed instead. Luckily, it was only a couple of propeller blades broken. The next day we came back. I decided a G-string was not the best idea, so tried bikini bottoms. There were a few other people around, so I volunteered to go first. I think Ian was the more sensible one. I had rock rash for a few days. After lunch we went to Indiana Falls, about 500 meters further upstream, and spent some time swimming and taking photos. The next day we went to the newly opened Nanny's retreat. It was quite a long walk, with some climbing and long grass. We were very wary of snakes and sharp branches. It was very hot. Our lifesaver bottle is fantastic. It filters water so we can drink from water holes. This means we don't have to carry too much water with us. We eventually reached the gorge. It was amazing, well worth the walk. The water was crystal clear and meandered between the sandstone walls. We spent the day there, swimming, taking photos, and exploring. As you can see, there are plenty of curious fish. I found they like nibbling on shiny things. The next morning we drove out to the arch. There are the most incredible rock formations along the way, until eventually you reach the natural arch. We spent time exploring and using the landscape to create some amazing photos. Next stop was Teardrop Falls. It was quite a climb and a bit tricky to find, but we were rewarded by the fantastic views and a lovely cool swim. Our last stop was Nudie Hot Springs, where we stayed overnight. This is a spring-fed hot pool surrounded by pandanus palms. A great place to soak and relax after a day of hiking. It was time to leave this great place and continue on our journey. We headed back up to the main road. We spent the night at Butterfly Springs, a campground in Lyman National Park with a seasonal waterhole. Our next stop was the Towns River campground. The campground is about 1 kilometer off the road and is pretty basic. We found a great spot on the banks of the river. We could see where the crocodiles had pulled themselves out the water, so we kept well away. Not long after we left Towns River, we came across a stranded family. We used our sat phone to organise a tow truck from Catherine. The road surface varies, sometimes smooth and sometimes rough. Next stop was Roper Bar. We had been together on the road for a while. When Ian dropped me off to take photos, I just hoped he would come back to pick me up. We stopped at Roper Bar's store for some Coke and Magnums. A little way down the road, we stopped for our daily photo shoot. For the first time in 3 weeks, we were back on tar. Helping the family set us back a few hours. We were booked into the campground in Mataranka. The lights on the truck are very good. They light up almost a kilometre ahead. We still have to be very careful. In the morning we went down to Bitter Springs, a series of naturally fed thermal pools. Bring a snorkel and flippers because the water is crystal clear. Ian used an underwater housing for his camera to get this fantastic series of photos. Thanks for coming along on this journey with us. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please remember to like and subscribe.